It could be said that the timeline panel, where you build your sequences, where you actually make your films, is the heart of the editing experience. And if we were to take that poetic idea and extend it to the project panel, I suppose we would say the project panel is the heart of your project. It's in the timeline panel that you place your pieces of clip one after another to make your sequence, but it's in the project panel that you first pull together all of the different assets that you might ultimately choose or not choose to use in your work. Now, it's worth spending a little bit of time getting familiar with this panel because it's actually got a lot going on, even though it doesn't look that complicated. I'm just going to resize a little bit so you can see what's going on here. Now, pay no attention to these tabs along the top. These are just other panels sharing the same frame as the project panel. So what have we got? There's a quick search panel here, and under that we've got at the moment a list of items. I've made some bins inside the project panel, and if I scroll along to the right, I've got many different headings with information. Now these are all going to be blank because at the moment I'm looking at my bins. If I scroll back and expand my double identity bin, which has got all of these different clips, you can see now I'm getting a frame rate, a media start, an end, and duration, and so on and so on and so on. I can also switch my project panel to a thumbnail view, an icon view here, which initially isn't much use to me because I'm just getting thumbnails of the bins. So I'm just going to hold the command key down here, or the control key, and double click on the double identity folder. And this is going to give me these lovely big icons. Now this didn't used to be such a big deal feature in Premiere Pro. Up until Premiere Pro CS 5.5, the last release of Premiere Pro, you would get thumbnails like this and that would be it. And you could move them around and reposition them, but otherwise it was just there to get some sense of what's going on with your media. Not so in CS6. With Premiere Pro CS6, we now have this hover scrub feature. You see, I'm not clicking, I'm just wafting my mouse. That's probably not the technical term, but I'm moving my mouse across this clip. And effectively, the clip is becoming its own miniature timeline. You can see here, this shot, I can just quickly scrub through the content. This is hover scrubbing without actually clicking on anything. And I can see very, very quickly what my content includes. This is a really wonderful new feature. I've tried this myself and it makes browsing through your content and identifying your shots much, much faster. Down at the bottom, we've also got a zoom slider, and I can drag up here to increase the size of my thumbnails and get really perfectly watchable clips. If I select one of these items by single clicking on it, you'll notice that I've got a mini timeline, and I can click and drag that, and now I'm getting audio. In fact, I can even use the J, K, and L keys on my keyboard to play back. Now, I don't know how smooth this is going to look on your screen because of the frame rate that this is going to be displayed at. But if I press the L key, I'm going to play forwards. If I press the J key, I'm going to play backwards. And the K key pauses it. This is just brilliant. I can press the L key multiple times to go faster. And of course the J key is the same thing. So we've got this wonderful way of browsing through our media without even double clicking on it, as I have done now, to open it up in the source panel. And there's a couple of other useful buttons here. If I select a clip down inside the project panel, you'll notice that I've got a trash can. It's a clear icon. I can hit backspace, or delete does it too, actually. If I click on this, I get a warning saying that there are clip references in one or more sequences. And that's because over in my sequence, in my timeline panel, which admittedly is a bit crushed over to the right of my screen, I've got a copy of this clip. This has been used in a sequence. And Premiere Pro is just warning me that it's going to disappear, so that's fine. In fact, there you go. It's the first one at the beginning of the sequence. Now, just for the record, if you delete anything inside of Premiere Pro, you're not actually deleting your original media. Premiere Pro is a non-destructive editing system, which means no matter what you do inside of Premiere Pro, your original media will be untouched. You would have to go looking for it in the Finder or in Windows Explorer if you really wanted to delete the media. We also have a new item button here, which allows me to create, well, I guess the clue's in the name, isn't it? Create new items. I can make a new sequence. I can do that, of course, under the File menu, under New, and choose Sequence as well. And notice this has got a keyboard shortcut. That would be Command-N on a Mac. I can also make an offline file, which is of limited use, but it means that, for example, if you know that someone's going to supply you with a 10-second animation, you can create a 10-second file that has no media attached to it, just as a placeholder to link to later on and incorporate into your edit. Then you've got adjustment layers, which are a powerful new effects feature, and so on and so on and so on. This is probably your first point of call for creating these kinds of content. The color bars are pretty useful, the bars and tone, because they also generate an audio tone. They'll make a 1 kilohertz reference tone for calibrating your equipment. And of course, I've also got this new bin button. And there are a couple of very, very useful shortcuts in this panel. I'm just going to shrink these down a moment so we can see a bit more of our thumbnails. The first is, let's say I want to make a sequence that exactly matches the characteristics of my media. Perhaps I want the same frame rate, I want the same frame size and pixel aspect ratio and all of those things so that it very precisely matches my original media. Well, I can do this manually by clicking on New Sequence and manually selecting exactly the right settings. And the only downside with that is that I have to know what they are. And it's not always that easy to know. Instead, if I want to, I can select the clips I want to include in a sequence. Here I've just clicked on one and held down Shift and clicked on another. And then I can click and drag these onto the new item button. You see the little plus sign I'm getting there. When I let go of the mouse now, there we are. Premiere Pro has automatically generated a new sequence. It's got the name of the first clip, and that new sequence automatically has the settings that it needs to match my media. I've just zoomed out a little bit with the navigator here. And this means I don't need to worry about whether the settings are correct. Premiere Pro has worked it out for me. This is just a wonderful feature. I can also make new bins automatically, so I'm going to click on a few clips here and drag these onto the new bin button, and there we go. I've got a new bin which contains those clips. I'll just go back to the list view. It's a little bit easier to see what's going on here. There you go. I'm inside one of the bins and I can expand out the sub bin I've made. And it's just worth noting, for that matter, that you can have bins inside bins inside bins. So depending on how complex your project is, you might decide to build a complete organizational system before you start editing. I can't emphasize enough how valuable that is to do. So I've just gone up a level here with the button at the top left-hand corner of the project panel, so I can now see the rest of my project. If I go to the panel menu in the project panel, every panel has one of these little tiny panel menus. And I know it's outside of the orange outline, but it is the panel menu for this particular panel. You'll notice down here, I've got a couple of interesting options. First of all, metadata display. If I choose this, I can turn on or off any of the headings I want to be displayed in the list view. This is really, really powerful. You might, for example, want to know, well, let's see. Well, I suppose it's possible I might want to have the shot name. I'll click OK, and now if I scroll along here, there you go. I've got a shot name. And in fact, some of this content already has that metadata on it, although it looks like it's a bit of a mixed bag. This metadata is attached to the media, not to the clip. So it doesn't matter which application looks at it, it's going to be able to see this. I'm not limited to using this metadata inside of Premiere Pro. Another thing is that with the new layout that was introduced with CS6, the preview area was turned off by default. And you were always able to do this in Premiere Pro. It's just that by default it was on. If I turn this back on now, you'll notice it's actually pretty useful. First of all, I get a thumbnail view up here. Less of a benefit now that we've got the wonderful hover scrub feature, but I could use this if I go inside this bin by double-clicking it. Here we go. I could use this to change the thumbnail. You see, as I click away, the hover scrub is going to give me a quick view of the clip, but as I move the mouse away, it goes back to the default thumbnail. And it doesn't matter what I do with the thumbnail. If I want to change this so that every time I click away, it remains, well, whichever one I choose, I can select the clip first of all, and then drag through this little thumbnail at the top. And if I decide, yep, that's the one I want, click on the little camera, and now that becomes the default thumbnail, the one I get when I'm not looking at the clip. Notice I've also got some really useful information here. I've got the size of the image, I've got the pixel aspect ratio 1:1, the frame rate, the duration. It's a pretty handy bit of the panel, but of course it depends on what information you need. You might not need that information. You might prefer to have the screen space. Also though, notice that I've got this wonderful video used 2 times and audio used 2 times listing. If I click on the tiny little disclosure triangle here and expand this out, I'm getting information about not just which sequences this has been included in. There's my car right to left and double identity part 1. This is the name of the sequences, but even when it appears. And I can click on one of these entries and it's going to take me to that clip in the sequence. A really useful way of identifying directly from the bin whether your media has been used or not in a project. So that's the main interface elements in the project panel for Adobe Premiere Pro CS6.